Beautiful, fantastic. All right, so there will be breakout rooms going on. What we're gonna do here is do some practice problems. So once the groups start, I will drop a document in. I'm gonna show you guys what that looks like. So let's do that. Please work. Yay. All right, I'm gonna share my screen here, guys, so we can see what this looks like. Screen 3. Haha, there we go. All right. So we have here a Google document. I've created one for each group. Your group name is not going to match up to your team or group name in Teams, so sorry about that. But I will drop the document in here. You'll see there are 4 problems here, all based on section 10.1. There's a space for you to put your solutions. This is a Google document. You can do your work on paper, take a picture of it, put it in here. All right, you can type it in. There's nice math typing stuff in Google Docs. If you haven't used it, it's relatively easy. You just go insert equation. That'll do math stuff. And then gives you like some options and things to choose from. So I want you guys to work together to solve these problems. I'm just going to give you 30 minutes to work on this. Right? Just work. At the top of this here, there's a couple of notes. All right, well, first, make sure you type in the group members' names that are in your group. You're going to work with the group. You're going to get 30 minutes. There's the 4-step process. This is something that many of you haven't necessarily been doing properly yet. The 4-step process is there for a reason. It allows you to make sure you're doing all the necessary things to get full credit on the AP exam for your answer. It also helps you organize your work, which is also a nice plus. It also makes it so if you're using that, I can see what you're doing in your work as a reader of your work. Sometimes it's very hard to follow what you guys have written down because it's not organized. I can pick pieces out, I can usually make sense of it, but this helps. Right? So this says anytime you're asked to perform inference, construct and interpret a C% confidence interval, carry out a significance test, for example, and basically if you're asked, is this significant, right? Do they have good evidence that this is the thing? You're doing the 4-step process. All right. And so that needs to be practiced. Even if you're in your head, you're like, oh yeah, no, I get it, I can totally do this. That's all well and good, but if you don't practice, we don't know for sure. I don't know for sure, right? And if the first time you're trying to use it is on the AP exam, that's gonna be rough because you're not gonna be used to doing it. So we have to practice, all right? I have linked here in the document the study guide for section 10.1 that I made. This goes back into Canvas, that's where the study guide lives. And then we have a link here for the formulas and tables. That includes table A, table B, and all the formulas that you'll be provided on the AP exam. So that's something you want to start trying to use more so you're familiar with it. Okay. And then we have our questions. Obviously, they're all word problems because it's stats and we get lots of word problems. If you need clarification or you have questions about any of the problems, please ask. If you're here in person, you can actually physically raise your hand and I can come over and help you. Wow, that's new. And if you're not, you can virtually raise your hand and I will be happy to assist. Or just, since you'll be in your breakout rooms, I'll monitor those chats as well. We will be able to help, I'll be able to help you in that way. So we're gonna try to make this work here, guys. We'll do 30 minutes of you guys working. I'll be bouncing around in and out of the rooms, checking in with the groups. Those of you who are in person and in a breakout room, right, you'll want to kind of sit close-ish. So you may need to move a little bit, all right, so that you're relatively close. I have 2 groups of 3 and a group of 4 in the live room here, right? We're not allowed to move the desks you're sitting in, right, if that makes sense. So like if you move to a desk so that you're like in a clump of 3 or 4, you can't scoot closer, unfortunately. So you're gonna have to speak up and share your ideas in that way. If you would like to use a whiteboard, I have extras. You can use those. I'll give you a whiteboard marker. It'll be yours to keep. If you need more, I'll get more from the office. okay? There's also these whiteboards. Don't use those because obviously I have stuff on those for you guys up at the very front. But I have extras of these little ones and I have these on the back, okay? So if you need that here when you're live in person, please just ask. You're more than welcome to use the resources we have in the room. All right. Okay. Are there any questions before we begin this craziness that I have set up for today? You guys can't see me smiling, a nervous smile, but I swear I am. Let's see, I think everyone's back in here for the most part. Awesome. Okay, cool. All right. So thank you guys for working on that. I know that that was obviously not enough time to get through all 4 of the problems, right? But one of the things we're also going to start working on is that kind of timing aspect. Because of AP exam, you have limited time. Now that doesn't mean that you need to work fast and incorrectly, but you just need to get used to what it feels like to have only a certain amount of time, right, on things. Now, obviously, this is not graded. I'm not going to like force you to go finish it later. This was practice, and this was an opportunity to see the types of questions that we have, and now we're going to go over them. If you have questions, please let me know. Put them in the chat. Raise your hand. Do all that fun stuff. Let's see if I can do what I want to do this time and have it not go crazy. And again, this is handwritten, the stuff that I'm going to share. So if you can't read my writing, please tell me and I'll explain what it actually says. Yeah, that happens. And we're going to share that screen. All right. So we'll use this. Here we go. So the first exercise here was having to do with sampling distributions. All right. I used different notation. So population 1 was the child mix. Population 2 is the adult mix. Right. I used notation P subscript C and P subscript A for children and adults. Right. This was the assumed, or what they told us was the population distribution. Right. 0.3 red, 0.15 red. And then I have my sample sizes. The children's sample size was only 50. The adults was 100. Right. And that was a common error that I saw on different documents that were working on this, was that some used 50 for the sample size for everything. You have to be careful. We don't need to use the same sample size for the 2 different populations. They can be different. So make sure you make a note of that. And I like to put everything out here like this before I start any of the actual work. Then I just know where to go to look for it, and I'm not going back into the word problem. Right, so then for part A here, we have the distribution of P hat sub C minus P hat sub A will be approximately normal because all of these things are all at least 10. Right, because all of them are at least 10, we have 15, 35, 15, and 85. That is the large counts condition. That means that we can be approximately normal in our distribution. All right, the mean of the difference between the children and adult proportions is going to be 0.3 minus 0.15. That's just the proportions that we were told at the beginning. Right, and then we get 0.15. Standard deviation, right? We use this big old square root thing. Right, the standard deviation of the difference of the sample proportions is, right, we have P sub C times 1 minus P sub C over NC plus PA, 1 minus P over A, NA. So we get square root of 0.3 times 0.7 over 50 plus 0.15 times 0.85 over 100. And we get this fun decimal, 0.07399. If you round that to 0.074, that's totally fine. I didn't tell you how many spaces to keep. And showing your work, showing this part here helps make this correct, even if you round it weird, so to say. All right. Having shown this, the reader, right, someone who's grading this says, oh, they know the process. They're not just pulling a number out of a calculator and rounding it incorrectly or something like that. They just chose to round a certain decimal place, and that's fine. All right, so that is question 1. Is there any questions? Anything I can clarify? Okay. Then let's move to. That works. All right, this next question, right, is question 2 on your guys' stuff. Don't mind the 11, that's just from where I got the question from. All right, we have the same kind of, I set this up again, giving what my populations are, sample sizes, sample proportions, all right there at the top. All right, and then, right, we're constructing a confidence interval. We want a 99% confidence interval. That means we are constructing and interpreting a confidence interval. That means our 4-step process must happen. Right, we start with our statement. We want to estimate the parameter P1 minus P2, where P1 is the true proportion of men living at home and P2 is the true proportion of young women living at home at a 99% confidence level. That's our statement. That's what we're going to be doing. Our plan, if conditions are met, we will use a 2-sample Z interval for P1 minus P2. Yes?
Would you get the 2,353?
Okay. So someone's asking, where do we get this number, N1, 2,253? That is in... Sorry, I want to use... I want to use a blank document, sorry. Right here. All right, so our population sizes, our sample sizes, sorry, are listed there in the problem setup, the 2,253 men, 2006. That's okay, that's fine. Again, that's why when I first start the problems, I always pull out all the numbers. I go through the word problem, I read it once, and then I go through the second time and I write down all the numbers. That's how I personally organize myself when I solve word problems. Because the last thing I want to do is have to keep looking back to the word problem to retrieve numbers. All right. And so then this one. Okay. So yes, that's where our numbers came from. Thank you for asking the question. All right, so then we have our statement. We're now in our plan. And again, if conditions are met, 2-sample Z interval. All right. The Z statistic is used with proportions, typically in this case. The other side of it is using the T interval or T statistic when we're dealing with means. All right, so we get the stuff random. Well, the samples were random. We were told that in the context. All right, our 10% condition, there were more than 22,530 young men and 26,290 young women. All right, and I got those numbers just by multiplying the sample size by 10. Right, and it is obvious that we have more than that number of young men and young women in the US, in the population. So just stating that is sufficient. Lastly, we have the large counts. The number of successes and failures in both samples are at least 10. I'm not showing the numbers there, but we have 986 and 923 as our amounts for each one. If we subtract that from the sample sizes, we have well over 10. So I'm making that statement. All right, then we move on to the do part. We need 99% confidence interval. It leaves 1% for our tails, half of 1% of 0.005. That leads to a Z value of negative 2.575, which means our Z star value is 2.575. Remember that critical value is going to be a positive number. We're not going to use the negative number. We could use the negative number, and honestly, we'll still get the same numbers. We'll still get the same interval. But it's just more proper to write it as the positive value. Did you guys follow this right here where I got those things from? Does anyone need clarification? And then this is the formula that we use to get our interval. Right? And when we put all the numbers in there, we get 0.08655 plus or minus 2.575 times 0.013996. Obviously, there's some rounding going on in there. And we get this interval where the lower bound is 0.051 and the upper bound is 0.123. All right, so the interval is between 0.051 and 0.123 for that proportion. And again, it's always proper to label in your interval, put the smaller value first, comma, larger value. You should not list them in the other order. Mm-hmm. And then that leads us to our conclusion. We are 99% confident that the true difference of proportions P1 minus P2 of young men and young women who still live at home is captured between the interval 0.051 and 0.0123. And again, that conclusion needs to tie it into the context. You can't just say this is the interval. And then the last part of this, part B, since the interval does not contain 0, there's convincing evidence that the true proportion of young people who live at home is different for men and women. We're not actually even saying that there's more men than women that live at home or more women than men. We're just saying it's different. There's a different proportion of each, because that's what we were asked. All right. And I think we're going to end there for today because it's been a minute, right? Like over an hour. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay, so yeah, that's where we're going to stop today. Obviously, you guys still have the links to all these this document. You can refer to these questions. There are very similar questions in the practice problems and solutions that are listed in Canvas for section 10.1. So if you want to look at those problems, you're more than welcome to, and all the solutions are there. I will not be posting the solutions to these problems yet because I still need to use them for the rest of the classes today and tomorrow. And on Thursday, so they will be posted, but probably at the end of the week, so you guys can refer to those. But yeah, other than that, I apologize for technical difficulties, and if things seem to run a little poorly today, we'll get it figured out. Thank you all for your patience, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.